This is a special edition of the Fight Block. It's a recap of UFC 128. Last night we saw the potential end of a legendary career and the rise of a new star. I got a couple guests here with me to talk about the fights. We got fellow MMA enthusiasts Matt, Kyle. We're going to start off by talking about the Brendan Schaub Mirko Cro Cop fight. So the fight was pretty even. First round went to Brendan Schaub. Second round, Cro Cop. Cro Cop won the second round actually 10-8 because Schaub had a point deduction for punching Cro Cop in the back of the head several times while in the clinch. Third round, Brendan Schaub clips Cro Cop on the chin, drops him, then runs over, delivers another punch, bounces Cro Cop's head off the ground. The ref steps in, pulls Schaub off of Cro Cop. It was a brutal knockout. A tough loss for Cro Cop. Possibly the last fight we may ever see Cro Cop in. I know post-fight Dana White was saying that this was probably the last fight that Cro Cop will ever be in the UFC. He was sort of doing the same thing he did with Chuck. We haven't gotten any official announcement from Cro Cop, but pretty much Dana White was saying that Cro Cop probably won't argue with him and that he is in fact going to retire. With that being said, I'm going to have to agree with Dana, and I thought before this fight Cro Cop was at the end of his career. And really, I mean, he's a legend. He's done a lot for this sport, been in some crazy battles, but the current talent now is just too young, too fast, and I think this is the last time we see Cro Cop in the UFC. So those are my thoughts on Cro Cop. I don't know, you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, personally, I feel like you were making a good point in saying that the new people are just too strong and too fast and too athletic now for Cro Cop to handle, and I feel like Cro Cop's just his mental game when he's in mid-fight, that's what's really stopping him as well. Like, I don't feel like he has the drive anymore. He talks about his drives before his fights, and it seems like the past couple fights he's been talking about how, like, he feels better than ever, and he feels like this is his comeback. Exactly. And I just feel like that all goes out the window once he starts getting a couple punches in and his kicks, and he doesn't go what the fans are wanting to see. I mean, you saw that with his one kick. He threw one, I think it was a head kick, and you just hear a roar, but it didn't even connect.
Yeah, I mean, the first round, Cro Cop really didn't come out. He didn't throw any shots, really. He was very hesitant, and I mean, his strength are his head kicks. And when he does throw those head kicks, they look vicious, and they look like they do some damage, and he just doesn't throw those for whatever reason as frequently anymore.
Well, moreover, it's like not even only his head kicks, his leg kicks are brutal too, but he's not throwing them, and those are perfect setups to allow him to continue fighting the way he used to fight. And I just feel like Dana White's right in saying that he probably shouldn't fight again in UFC because it just doesn't seem like he has the drive. I know you're a big fan of Cro Cop, so I don't know if like...
That's right, I am a big fan of Cro Cop's. I do actually, however, agree with you guys that seeing Cro Cop in the cage today is really quite different than seeing him even just a few years ago. There are plenty of opportunities for him to throw counter lefts, jabs, leg kicks, body kicks, not even just the head kick, and it seemed like he was content to let Schaub close the distance and clinch up against the cage with him. That's not the Cro Cop I remember seeing. Despite the fact that he is on the downside of his career, however, I don't really see as much of a mental or I guess you could say health-related, reason for him to quit. He seems like he wants to be in there, even though he's realized he's never going to climb to the top again. I agree wholeheartedly, though, that I do think the division has passed him by, and that matching him against Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez, guys like that are just not in the cards anymore. I would, however, be interested in seeing novelty fights against Randy Couture or a rematch against Big Nog, but outside of fights like that, I do wholeheartedly agree with Dana's decision to pull the trigger.
To close off, quick thoughts on Brendan Schaub. Another impressive win for him. Impressive knockout finish. Thoughts?
It's hard to gauge at this point, really. Schaub's next fight, I think, will determine it all. Is this a guy who's going to be one of the next level A-listers in the division? Or is this a guy who kind of capitalized off the fact that Gabriel Gonzaga had a really poor game plan and that Mirko Cro Cop's chin was potentially killed by Frank Mir's last blow? I think only time will tell. As of now, I would put myself as being interested in seeing Schaub's next fight, which is what you need to keep getting fights in the UFC.
Any ideas of who a possible opponent could be for Schaub? Who's the next step?
Possible opponent for Schaub, potentially the winner of Stefan Struve and Travis Brown. However, because he just got a big name under his belt, I say why not give him the fight he originally asked for, the winner of Frank Mir-Roy Nelson.
Second fight on the card was Nate Marquardt against Dan Miller. Marquardt worked his way to a decision. A couple scary moments for him. He was caught in some deep guillotines by Miller, but was able to escape. Really didn't look all that impressive. Had a couple of stand-up combinations. There was one time he threw in a flying knee, but I mean, really other than that, he sort of worked his wrestling and controlled Dan Miller. Thoughts? What's next for Marquardt?
According to Marquardt himself, it may be a run at the title at 170 pounds, actually. He looked quite a bit leaner last night. Am I the only one who noticed?
No, yeah. And, I think it was an interview with Ariel Helwani online. I'll post the link in the description box. But he did mention, in fact, that he's thinking about dropping down to the welterweight division, which I find surprising because Marquardt has always been known as a heavy middleweight and a big middleweight. But now he's talking about moving down to welterweight.
Which is interesting because his teammate GSP is actually, or occasional training partner I should say, is actually the champ in that division. And in that same interview with Ariel Helwani, he actually seems to get kind of nervous and off-put when asked whether or not he would face GSP. So that should be interesting. I, however, don't think that there's a need to just yet unless he really feels like his body's belonging there. Because there's plenty of interesting fights left for him at 185. Where he goes from here is really up to him. I'm interested in seeing him in either division. Yeah,
well, you mentioned that he's training partners with GSP at Greg Jackson's camp. Maybe Marquardt's got a little bit of a inside info from GSP and what his exact thoughts are post-Shields. I know GSP's kind of held back lately in the Silva-GSP discussion, talking about possibly staying at welterweight and not fighting. But maybe Marquardt is thinking that depending on how GSP does against Shields, if GSP does in fact move up, then there is an opportunity for that vacant welterweight title. And if Marquardt is able to drop down to welterweight division, I think he'd be right in the mix. And I mean, a great matchup would be him against Diego Sanchez, and possibly winner of that fight could get a title shot depending on who's champion. So.
Make an excellent point. Maybe Marquardt did let a little bit of a cat out of the bag there with regards to knowing GSP's future plans. I think that the UFC might be interested in matching up with Michael Bisping at 185. He actually mentions that a few times in the interview. He's one of the interesting fights left for him. They may try to rematch him against Yoshihiro Akiyama because that fight fell apart according to the tragedy.
The next fight was the lightweight battle between Jim Miller and Kamal Shalharuz. Jim Miller works his way to a TKO victory in the third round over tough competitor Kamal Shalharuz. That's number 7 in a row for Jim Miller. Impressive win because, I mean, Kamal Shalharuz, he's no joke. He's a tough competitor coming over from the WEC. And really, Jim Miller pretty much controlled the stand-up.
I think Miller, for the most part, made it look not easy, I would say, but there was never a moment in my mind that really made me scared for Jim Miller or the outcome of the fight. I've long said that Shalharuz kind of just ducks to avoid punches a lot of the time, and that leaves you open for knees, uppercuts, all kinds of things.
Jim Miller, you think he deserves a title shot? He's right there in the mix.
Yeah, he's kind of in no man's land right now, though, and Jim Miller's probably really rooting for Clay Guida to beat Pettis, because if Pettis wins, he gets a title unification bout. If Guida wins, however, they could conceivably match Jim Miller against Clay Guida.
I'm really excited about Jim Miller. It's been really impressive to watch him come up the ranks.
The co-main event was a bantamweight matchup between the California Kid and Eddie Wineland. It was a pretty close fight. Went to the very end, went to the judges. Uriah Faber pulled off a decision. This fight had title implications on it, and I believe after the fight, Dana White said Uriah Faber will in fact be the next person in line for Dominic Cruz's bantamweight title. But there has also been a lot of talk of the potential of Faber and Cruz being the coaches on The Ultimate Fighter for Season 14. However, Dana White said that Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz will not be the coaches on Season 14. He's got someone else in mind. He didn't reveal it just yet, but that being said, Uriah Faber works his way to a decision. Pretty close fight. Wineland, first round, was able to stuff a lot of Faber's takedowns, but Faber turned it on second and third, had some great combinations.
It was pretty clear to me the whole way through that it was a reasonably competitive fight. I now see why they booked it. Eddie Wineland is no joke, and I think he'll be held on to. But the outcome of the fight wasn't really in doubt. After a bit of a feeling out process, I'd say Faber was in control, and he landed some pretty good shots.
Beautiful takedown in the third.
Beautiful takedown in the third, correct. Credit to Eddie Wineland for some excellent takedown defense, though. He stuffed quite a few of them.
Well, actually, what I really like is to see the 135 weight class being promoted as a co-main event in a major UFC pay-per-view, because I was really worried about, I was seeing a lot of those weight classes in the prelims and not on the main card, and especially not co-main eventing. But this really shows that they're putting some stock into this weight class.
Yeah, I mean the lighter weight divisions, they always bring it. They're always good fights. A lot of people get pumped about the heavyweight fights, but actually these lighter weight classes consistently deliver great fights. Dana White knows now that Faber won that Faber versus Cruz is going to be a big fight for them in for the bantamweight title.
And speaking of co-main events, coming up we do have Mark Hominick in front of his hometown crowd, co-main eventing under the one and only GSP,
fighting Jose
Aldo for the title. So you'll get to see more of the lighter weight classes being showcased on the main stage.
In the main event, Jon Jones took on champion Mauricio Shogun Rua. Really, like all his past fights, dominated Shogun, took him down first round, controlled him on the ground. There's a couple times that Shogun attempted knee bars, but other than that, really, Jones' size, his reach advantage, his youth, his speed, it was just too much for Shogun. I mean, I'm not too sure if Shogun was 100% or if he in fact came into this fight in shape. There was a lot of questions going into this fight how Shogun would stack up against Jones, whether he would actually pose a challenge, unlike all the past opponents Jones has gone up against. I mean, Jones once again looks impressive, does it against a legend, and wins the title. And really, this is probably the start of a new era, because I'm not sure who can beat Jones.
I mean, as far as the fight goes, yeah, complete and utter control and one-sidedness for the most part. I knew going into this fight that the biggest X factor wasn't even whether Jones accepting the fight on such a short notice would play into it. That was probably the second most, but it was how cardio would affect Shogun. And I think that's Shogun's really only weakness for the most part. I think that he showed that he kind of looked as he did before the Forrest Griffin fight, or during the Forrest Griffin fight and the Mark Coleman fights. That isn't to take away from Jones' win. That being said, I still see Shogun as actually the biggest threat to the title. I see a healthy, in-shape Shogun being much more dangerous than Quentin Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans, or any other people on the horizon right now.
I mean, yeah, there's still a lot of great fights left for Shogun in UFC. I think time and healing will only help Shogun, and like you said, I still think he's one of the top in the division.
Jones' next fight is set, obviously, but I think that the fight that I'm kind of looking for as far as Shogun would go would be a rematch against Forrest Griffin. I think that's the one that makes most sense.
I know if Rampage wins his upcoming fight, he potentially could get the next shot at the winner of Rashad and Jon Jones. But I think a Shogun Rampage rematch would also be a great future fight. And yeah, I just hope that Shogun comes back in shape and healthy, and we get to see the Shogun that showed up for the Machida fights, because that fighter was dangerous. Last fight of the night went to Edson Barbosa and Enjo Kawani. I predicted this fight to be fight of the night, and it delivered. It was a great stand-up war. Both guys throwing spinning elbows, spinning back kicks, heel kicks, and it was all around just a great striking battle between the two. Edson Barbosa ended up winning that fight by decision. I was surprised it didn't get finished. There were several opportunities for both guys to finish the fight, but in the end, went to the judges. Edson Barbosa pulled off a unanimous decision. Great night of fights. It's a special edition of the Fight Block. Thanks for listening. Check out the Twitter, check out the blog, check out the subscribe button right there. Thanks.